Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Travel Show with John Guinn on ukhealthradio.com. At the end of the show there'll be travel news, various news stories from the last 7 days of travel, including one where Ryanair may be throwing their dolls out. Before that I'll be going through some travel jargon. It's the peak holiday season, so many of you may have already booked your holidays, but you might have words on your tickets you don't understand. I'll be running through the common ones in the middle of the show, although if you don't know what something means, you shouldn't hand your money over it until you know. But anyway, I'll be going through the A to Z of some travel jargon. But before that, I'm finishing off my chat with Frank Brehany from Holiday Travel Watch. Frank's been on the last 2 shows, and last week we were talking about the quality of the air in aircraft cabins and whether it can be making you ill. If you wasn't listening, well, basically most airlines, aircraft, the air into the aircraft cabin comes in via the engine compartment through a system called bleed air. And it's possible that the system can break down mechanically, which will allow pollutants into the air cabin, which of course you'll be breathing in. And is it making you ill? Before we get onto the whether the air around airports is also dangerous, I'm just finishing off on that subject. The European Aviation Standards Agency are investigating it again. There was a report that was due out a couple of months ago and it's late. And I checked with the European Aviation Standards Agency and they reckon it's going to be released in March. If it is released in March, of course, it will be mentioned on the show. So I wanted to see if Frank had any final words on air cabin quality, the quality of air in aircraft cabins, and what people could do if they feel that they are at risk and they want to know more.
I think, with people like me turning up at the European Commission and others, even far greater than me, knocking on the doors of, the DGs in Brussels and also the European Aviation Safety Agency, eventually, it's got to the point where they have to answer the question. They know that there is a problem with chemicals escaping into the aircraft. The debate is either structured around indoor air quality, and it's almost like a stuck needle record response, or indeed it's what they refer to as low exposure levels, which they say is harmless. Well, there are plenty of other areas in life where low exposure is not harmless. So, for example, you can have somebody suffering from low exposure to carbon monoxide in your own home, and you can be suffering long-term health deficits. You can be living on top of a house built on top of a refuse disposal tip, so to speak. And the chemicals that come out of that ground can slowly intoxicate you over periods of time. And I think they realise, particularly, I've heard a lot of conversation in recent months about European law, but if you look at the Lisbon Treaty is extremely helpful to citizens and consumers. And one of the articles in the Lisbon Treaty says that in every policy or lawmaking area of the European Union, there must be a high standard set of consumer protection, and that means health and safety as much as it means financial. Within the Lisbon Treaty, tourism and transport have been given a very clear competence with the European Commission to get on and sort out the problems. And I think since the Lisbon Treaty and people like us going across there, I think it's changed the debates. I think people, in power have realised this is not something they can ignore. It's not going to go away. It's going to take a long time before the likes of Dreamliners are going to be the norm of aircraft. We're going to have aircraft that are being built now in service for the next 30, 40 years. And so therefore solutions have to be found, and people's health have to be dealt with and have to be respected.
Does it mean until every aircraft like the Dreamliner, we're going to see more people wear face masks when they go on board? I seem to see more and more of those at Luton Airport for some reason.
Yeah, there is a growing number of people actually within this debate who are advocating that passengers should be fitted with a not fitted, to be handed a face mask. I can just see people being fitted, but to be handed a face mask as part of as almost like wearing a seatbelt. That's not going to happen. It would be commercially difficult, I think, for airlines to do that, and politically difficult to deliver that in legislation and enforce that. But there are people out there, there are companies out there selling masks for people that they can buy whilst they sit on board an aircraft. In fact, there was a debate on Radio 4 Today, which was talking about the wearing of masks if you're walking around cities, and about how they can reduce your exposures to the nitrous oxides and so on and so forth in our atmospheres from traffic on the road. So I expect to see the discussion about masks on aircraft to actually grow in strength over the next couple of years.
If you're going abroad by plane, boat, or the family car, if you're going abroad for pleasure or business, there's one essential thing to do before you go. Check the expiry date on your European Health Insurance card. You can renew it up to 6 months before it expires. Visit nhs.uk/healthcare abroad or call 0845 606 2030. Bon voyage!
You're listening to The Travel Show with John Guinn on ukhealthradio.com. Still to come, the A to Z of travel jargon, those funny little words and letters that might appear on your e-tickets when you've booked your flights. So last weekend, for the beginning of this show, we were talking about the air in an aircraft, whether it's dangerous or not, how it could be putting you at risk and why people feel that is the case. But I was at Luton Airport a few days ago and there was a really strong smell, which I assume is avgas, the airline fuel, or it could be exhaust fumes from the jet. Whatever it was, inside the terminal building, it really, really smelt. So if the air in the aircraft can be bad for you, what about the airport? Are you breathing in contaminated air in the airport buildings? Is anybody looking into it? The stuff that's coming when the planes take off and land, is that going into people's houses near the airport? Are they at risk? So to finish off the how travel might be making you ill section, we're going to be talking about, me and Frank are going to be talking about the quality of the air around the airport itself.
It's a really good question, and I'll tell you, I came into contact with this when I was working in practice as a solicitor, and I was dealing with clinical negligence cases at the time, and I went to visit a client at the end, who lived at the end of the runway at Birmingham Airport, and as I was, this is going back quite a few years now, as I was coming out of the house, this aircraft shot over the roofs of the houses, and I was really surprised how close we were to the runway. And this client explained to me that, this was a common feature of their lives. But he said that he also felt there was an awful lot of ill health as well. And he went round the croft that I was in and he pointed out what he explained were the various illnesses that people had. Now, in fairness, airports will say that's just nothing to do with us at all, because we measure air quality, and the air quality is within the limits that are set by law, and they will say that those qualities are, or those standards are very high, and that they comply with them. And, you see this kind of debate going on around Heathrow and indeed other airports around the world. And the best indicator, I think, of what you see going around airports are actually those consumer or campaigning groups based in the United States, particularly in California. And you'll see how they go into the detail if you look for those reports online. What they say is the exposure limits around those airports. Now, that's the United States. I don't know what the exposure levels or limits are in the United States, but they will set out the levels of carcinogens, but they also report back on the number of people who are exposed to these and the cancers and the various other ailments that they develop. But you can take it a bit closer to home because the trade unions in this country are also concerned about the people who work in the airport itself, particularly the apron staff. The fuel loaders, the lollipop man as he brings the aircraft into the stand. There is concern, baggage handlers, growing concern about the exposure that they have to chemicals in and around the aircraft and the levels of chemicals. But again, the contrary argument to all of this is that the airports will come back and say that the health levels of their staff are well guarded, well protected. But at the moment, you've got competing voices. You've got the voices of crew and cabin staff and even indeed ground handling staff versus the airlines and the airports and the authorities and politicians and the like. And it's a fascinating debate. It's a huge debate, but it's one, quite frankly, that's going to have to find a resolution one way or the other, even for those who live around the airport, I suspect.
For those who are concerned about air quality, especially when they're flying and in the cabin, is there anywhere they can go to find some more information?
Yeah, we have a fair bit on our website, which is allthews.holidaytravelwatch.com. But you can also find another other websites, one of which is aerotoxic.org. And there's a couple of films out there. There's one film made by a German filmmaker called Tim van Beveren. And if you just type in Tim's name, Tim van Beveren, that's Vanbeveran, you will find that he's a German documentary producer, filmmaker, and he's produced an excellent film which exposes the whole issue of chemical exposure from fuel on aircraft,